either Trump has to back down or he needs to continue this war until he gets rid of this guy. And that's, obviously there are consequences of that for how long this war goes on, how much disruption we're going to see, how much bloodshed we're going to see, what it's going to do to the global economy. It took 20 years in Afghanistan to go from the Taliban to the Taliban for the United States, with trillions of dollars spent and tens of thousands of lives destroyed. Here it only took a week to go from Khamenei to Khamenei in the Islamic Republic. So I guess the Americans are faster in a lack of result. Venezuela, not only did the Americans have a lot of people they were engaging with that were prepared to act pragmatically for money and their own survival, Iran doesn't have that, right? This is a theocracy. It is led by fundamentalists who are not solely motivated by money and power. And so there is a willingness, and which Trump doesn't really understand, right? Trump assumes that all political leaders are like him. In the case of Iran, he is negotiating with people that do not have a price. And therefore, the costs are going to be a lot higher. And the ability to achieve regime change may well be a much higher cost than the Americans are prepared to pay. You'll remember, he has a problem now in ending the war quickly, and that he has not achieved and will not have achieved a couple of the things that he didn't need to say he was going to do, but he's now, relentlessly on the record in saying this is a core component of why we're fighting this war, because this war did not need to be kill the supreme leader, kill all the military leaders, blow up the Straits of Hormuz. The war did not need to be that.
Are you watching the Times of India? I'm Aditi Prasad, and with me is Ian Bremmer, and we're going to be talking, of course, he's the president Eurasia Group and a very, very notable political scientist in the United States. And sir, I want to talk to you and come directly to the point. And before I get into specifics, what is your understanding of the Iran-US war as on date? It's been 9 days now. What's your assessment of how things have gone so far?
It's not gone the way that Trump has hoped or expected. The military efforts by the United States have been pretty successful. They're doing a lot of damage to Iran's military capabilities, their ballistic missile capabilities. Their Navy's been basically destroyed. But they thought that they were going to have a new leader and a new government that they would be able to work with, like in Venezuela. That's completely wrong. And absent that, there's been all sorts of consequences in terms of strikes on the Gulf states, particularly with drones. The U.S., of course, has already taken 7 casualties, deaths of servicemen and women. There has been massive disruption, unprecedented historic disruption of the Straits of Hormuz, which is causing big spikes in oil price, in natural gas price, and fertilizer around the world, that is starting to be affected in the United States, of course, in India as well. And all of that was not expected by President Trump. So, we all know that when you launch a major war, there can be unexpected consequences. We're seeing a lot of unexpected consequences in the first 9 days of this war so far.
I understand that, and I'm going to come to those unexpected consequences of the war in a bit. But let me talk to you about Mojtaba Khamenei. He's just been announced the new Iranian leader after the death of his father, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in US-Israeli strikes in Iran. His elevation as the new ruler, what does that mean for what is the signal that's sending for this conflict?
It's showing that the Iranian leadership is in an intransigent mode. They don't feel any utility in taking a more moderate path, the way that you saw the Iranian president Pezeshkian, who doesn't have any real power, more of a symbolic figure, saying, well, we're sorry about attacking, the Gulf states. And then immediately after, there were more Iranian attacks of the Gulf states. This is a very different kind of signal. This is a signal that says we're going to do exactly what we want to do. We're going to have a leader that will follow exactly what Ali Khamenei, his father, would have done. And of course, President Trump, who has said that he implausibly demands a say in who the next leader of Iran is going to be, this is unacceptable to him. So essentially, that means either Trump has to back down or he needs to continue this war until he gets rid of this guy. And that's, obviously there are consequences of that for how long this war goes on, how much disruption we're going to see, how much bloodshed we're going to see, what it's going to do to the global economy. It took 20 years in Afghanistan to go from the Taliban to the Taliban for the United States, with trillions of dollars spent and tens of thousands of lives destroyed. Here it only took a week to go from Khamenei to Khamenei in the Islamic Republic. So, I guess the Americans are faster in a lack of result. But obviously, this is not what anyone in the Trump administration was hoping to see.
What do you think the next, you say that they will have to. It was clearly not the shock and awe and collapse operation that Trump administration perhaps had hoped for. That why do you think they couldn't execute a Maduro-like swoop in and swoop out strategy in Iran? What's different here?
Well, you could have probably taken, they knew where the supreme leader was. It's possible that they could have had an effort to actually take him and some of those around him out. It would have been much more dangerous. You would have likely had casualties. But the difference is you take him out, you don't have a group of people that you're capable of suddenly working with in a new mode. Venezuela, not only did the Americans have a lot of people they were engaging with that were prepared to act pragmatically for money and their own survival, Iran doesn't have that, right? This is a theocracy. It is led by fundamentalists who are not solely motivated by money and power. And so there is a willingness, and which Trump doesn't really understand, right? Trump assumes that all political leaders are like him. Like everyone basically has a price, and once I meet that price, I can get whatever I want. If the price is too high, it's going to be harder to negotiate. If it's too low, I can be predatory. In the case of Iran, he is negotiating with people that do not have a price. And therefore, the costs are going to be a lot higher. And the ability to achieve regime change may well be a much higher cost than the Americans are prepared to pay. You'll remember in January, over 3 days, there were tens of thousands of Iranians that were killed by their own regime. And Trump said, I will rescue you. Now, in order to do that, you either need American boots on the ground in large number, or you need support of a domestic opposition that is coordinated and capable. You need at least one of those things. You might need both. You don't have either. And so absent that, this regime is going to stay in place. So Trump can easily declare victory and stop the fighting. And once the smoke is cleared, there'll be a much weaker regime with less capacity to project power around the region, though still some. But at that point, I assume there are going to be demonstrations in Iran again, and they will be killed. And when that happens, it will be on Trump, right? So he has a problem now in ending the war quickly, and that he has not achieved and will not have achieved a couple of the things that he didn't need to say he was going to do, but he's now, relentlessly on the record in saying this is a core component of why we're fighting this war, because this war did not need to be kill the supreme leader, kill all the military leaders, blow up the Straits of Hormuz. The war did not need to be that. The war, that was a war of choice. That is on Trump, right? The war could have been they are rebuilding their nuclear capabilities. We warned them. They're building too many ballistic missiles. We warned them. So we're going to do the 12-day war again. Maybe it'll be 18 days or 24 days, but it's going to be focused on those military targets. Trump could have easily done that with the Israelis. He could have done that with American allies in the region. He could have coordinated with NATO. He chose not to. He chose not to. He didn't need to order the blowing up of a ship that with all of the officers on board that had just engaged in exercises invited by the government of India. He didn't need to do that. He chose to. He chose to. So those things that have led the Iranian government to now act in a much more desperate way, decentralizing their own chain of military command and letting their local commanders hit whatever they can hit, whether it's a desalination plant or it's a five-star hotel or it's an airport, civilian apartments, you name it, even in Oman, which was leading the mediation process between the Iranians and the United States. So, I mean, Trump owns this. This is on the American president.
Escalation obviously occurred at many levels as far as Trump is concerned. From what you said, the war goals that he had outlined initially, you see them being met now, especially with the elevation of Mojtaba Khamenei and the, as you pointed out, the decentralization of this fight back from Iran.
The direct high-level military goals that Trump has laid out, some of them have been mostly met. The nuclear goal has not, and that would likely require commandos sent on the ground in a very dangerous operation that the Israelis support and the American military commanders oppose. But generally speaking, he has either accomplished most of those goals or we can see a path to accomplish those goals. The political goals that he has, which he's made clearly, he is nowhere close to accomplishing any of those goals.
For instance, let's just come to the battlefield itself. The strike on the Iranian girls' school inside Iran, completely unnecessary. And now apparently there is a video of
a
US
Tomahawk
missiles,
missile that's actually hit,
right? US missiles hitting that school, which was next to an. I mean, so India and Pakistan were in a 3-day, 4-day Operation Sindoor. India said we're going to go inside Pakistan and we're going to strike out their terrorist targets. And we went in and we struck those terrorist targets inside Pakistan, and we came back, no additional casualties, no collateral damage. In this case, an entire school, several hundred, scores of children.
Yeah, I got to say, I was quite surprised and disappointed in my president when he was asked about it, and he said that was the Iranians, it wasn't the United States. And his own Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, quite surprisingly contradicted him directly right there and said, "Sir, actually, there's an investigation ongoing." It's quite clear. The evidence makes it quite clear this came from the United States. This was not intended. This was clearly a horrible, tragic mistake, and of which there have been many historically by many countries participating in war. Some justified, some unjustified. But a strong leader takes accountability for the mistakes that are made under his watch. Trump is commander in chief. And if the United States tragically makes a hit that kills civilians, he has to own that. And his unwillingness to do that shows at some level his unfitness for the presidency. And it's unfortunate that we're seeing that play out because, of course, this really undermines the United States as a country, as an ally, as a partner that can be relied upon, that can be trusted.
staying with the battlefield, sir, there is, on paper, as you pointed out, some of the war goals are being met. The US-Israel alliance has overwhelming military superiority, of course. Yet, Iran still is managing to create havoc in the region with its missiles, with its drones, with and of course Iranian proxies, what were once called the axis of resistance. So why? So who's really winning this war right now? As per
Well,
you?
the Iranians are losing the war. The Iranian people are losing the war. The Iranian regime is losing the war. They don't have that many ballistic missiles left, and those they have, they don't have that many missile sites. And the next few days of military operations will be the United States and Israel finding and targeting those additional sites and taking them out. Now, drone warfare is much more diffuse. It's much more decentralized. It doesn't require launch pads. These drones are comparatively small. They're quite inexpensive. A Shahed costs about $50,000 compared to what the interceptor would cost to knock it down and the damage it can do. And that's something that at the local level, the Iranians will probably have some capacity to continue to launch drones for months if the war is continued. I also would say that the ability of proxies to engage in strikes is not very great. Hezbollah launched all of 6 missiles in the initial attacks against Israel that reopened that war at the ordering of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in Iran. Before the decapitation of Hezbollah, that would have, a typical salvo would have been 40 to 100 missiles. So they just don't have the capabilities they used to have. Hamas doesn't have the capabilities. Bashar Assad is no longer in power in Syria. He's in Moscow. So the Syrians are no longer supporting Iran in any way. You've seen that the Houthis have not yet been willing to support in Iran. They are looking for a better deal, a better offer, extorting the Gulf states. And saying, well, if we don't attack you, what are you willing to give us? Because they know that they're not going to get the kind of money from Iran going forward that they have over the past decade. So for all of those reasons, the axis of resistance is not really the focus here. It's much more those commanders, those local commanders that have access to weaponry, as well as perhaps what the Iranians might do in supporting the export of terrorist operations around the world.
And the three, one or two or three big escalation factors or triggers that could turn this into a wider Middle East conflict, according to you?
One would be a large scale attack that is successful and has significant American casualties, either in the region or a terrorist attack in the United States, God forbid. Here I'm talking about, 20 Americans killed or more. So something that really would be, the focus on here is the biggest thing that has been done against the U.S. You've had 7 American servicemen and women that have been killed so far. That's come out in 3 different news cycles. Every death is a tragedy. Those kids that got killed in the school are a tragedy, but they're not having the kind of impact on American decision making that a mass death incident would, either of servicemen and women or of civilians. So that's one. Second would be if we see an additional spike in oil prices beyond 100 to 120, and if that comes with significant long-term damage to some of the oil facilities, the critical energy facilities. We've never seen the Straits of Hormuz shut down before, but then you'd be talking about a global recession. We are not yet in that environment at this point. I think that would be very significant as well. And the final one would be if there was a very large scale attack on a Gulf state that felt existential, that felt like that the UAE was no longer able to say that they were a global hub for tourism, for commerce, for transit, and that they get directly involved in the war as a consequence of that. That would be a third sort of tipping point. But even if there are no tipping points, I already view this as likely the largest foreign policy mistake that Trump has made over the course of his two administrations, and it is quite unpopular in the United States. It is overwhelmingly likely to become more unpopular over the coming months, and that is happening at a time that he was already underwater on ICE immigration and on affordability, critically speaking, with midterm elections coming up. So the consequences for Trump, I think, are very significant.
Consequences for Trump in midterm elections, clearly from a president of peace that he wanted to project himself as. He's now a president who's actually started, one of the biggest chaotic wars right there in the Middle East. But what is the best case scenario from here on, according to you?
Yeah, it's unusual. I mean, he's been trying to, talk so often about being the Nobel Peace Prize deserving that award. And he started the Board of Peace. Indonesia just suspended their discussions because of the war in Iran. Of course, they were going to join. I saw some of his advisors claiming that this is a war that has been going on for 47 years between Iran and the US ever since the revolution. So Trump isn't really starting a new war. He's actually ending the 47-year war. It's almost the definition of Orwellian war is peace. And his own voters aren't buying that. It's not credible. It's not plausible when Americans are coming back dead as a consequence of decisions that he made. And the best case scenario is that he declares victory as soon as possible, even though that victory is limited compared to the goals that he's made, which reduces the likelihood of others being killed. It reduces the likelihood of more Americans coming home in body bags. It limits the economic damage. And then you play the longer game. You re-engage in negotiations from a stronger position because you say, hey, you said you weren't going to negotiate on your ballistic missiles and your nukes, so we took those out. And so now we're going to have a more meaningful conversation where you have a lot fewer cards. That's probably the best case scenario for Trump right now. There is a implausible scenario where the regime collapses and a more representative regime comes in. That does not seem very likely at all to me at this point.
So, according to you, which probably should be at least keeping some of the Trump administration officials awake at night.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that they all understand that they're not likely to do well here in November, and Trump is not going to accept a loss. He doesn't accept, his own failures, and so his willingness, he will be more constrained. But as he is more constrained, he will also be more inclined to double down, and that dynamic is the one that we'll be watching over the coming months, and frankly, over the coming 3 years.
I think I'm a couple of minutes above the time that you promised us. So thank you so much for all your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.